All right, Cindy, thank you for coming into the Fox Den here, all the way from the UK.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you for asking me to be on.
Yeah, I saw that you're a huge advocate for mental health, and I wanted to have you on immediately when I saw that. Where exactly are you based in the UK?
So I'm based in North London.
Ah.
It's it's a place called Wood Green. I'm sure you probably have no idea
Oh, it sounds
what
nice.
I'm talking about. Yeah, but in terms of work, because I also take a lot of international clients, I'm mainly based physically, of course, in North London, but I do Skype consultations, written therapy sessions, basically everywhere, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. Isn't it great that you can do those kind of things now, and we're not limited by actual physical boundaries?
Yes, I know it's such a gift because obviously when you're in the mental health field, you know, your goal is to reach as many people as possible across all borders. So I'm
Right.
so thankful now, you know, we have social media to utilize as a tool to be able to spread healing modalities to people who otherwise they wouldn't even know, you know, they have these options available.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any formal educational background or what? Just tell me about the path that you took to get where you are, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I studied psychology. I studied psychology in school. I studied sociology. I made it to graduate level.
Wow, that's big.
Yes, yes, I did, but I didn't actually complete graduate level because the further I got into traditional psychology, the more I felt like it was missing something. I felt like it was very much boxed in. So for me, my journey with psychology basically brought me to spirituality. It brought me to spiritual concepts because for me, psychology was never enough. It was like a starting point, but there were still so many things that just didn't make sense for me and just didn't connect with me, especially with the path that I was taking. And I felt like a lot of the reason that people don't gravitate towards traditional therapy or counseling is because they still feel like something is missing. You know, they don't feel like they get the appropriate healing that they need or the answers that they seek. So I started studying psychology in college, and then I got into like my first year of higher level of education. And then I got hit with the depression bug. Very ironically, you know, I started to suffer from a depressive episode. So that was part of the reason also I took myself out of education at that time. And
Sure.
I basically, you know, I stayed home and I tried to process and make sense of how can somebody who studies psychology get depression? You know, for me, it was like, I should know all the concepts. I should know all the theories, you know. Logically, I shouldn't allow myself to get depressed. So I spent about 2 years at home. And obviously, this took a toll on me as well, because at the time, you know, I come from a very traditional background. So higher education was everything for my family. So that time that I took off, it also allowed me to dig even deeper into societal concepts. Okay, because now I was looking at, I had to leave education because I'm not feeling fully secure within myself. However, now instead of getting support from my family for taking care of my mental health, I actually got quite a negative response and a negative reaction, you know, for leaving education, you know, for being a bit of the rebel that I am. So that also took me into how culture and society plays a role in psychology.
Absolutely.
So within those 2 years, I started to study everything that I could get my hands on, different concepts about family structures and childhood structures. You know, it gave me the opportunity to understand that maybe some of my depression was due to the fact that, you know, I did come from a family that had such very strict and very narrow, you know, perceptions of how life should be and what life should be like. And of course, at the time, like everybody around me was in higher education. So I'm very thankful now for the isolation, not only did it give me enough time to develop individual thought about what I was going through, but it gave me time to start researching alternative psychology, which brought me to spirituality, and which brought me to so many different avenues. I started to research and find out about generational curses. I started to find out about, the links between trauma from family that is carried on and passed down, through DNA. Like, it explored so many avenues, basically, that I didn't feel like I could get through traditional psychology.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, Carl Jung himself talked about the idea of the wounded healer. And
Yes.
it's so important for us to recognize in the mental health field that
Yes.
a lot of people go into it because of empathy for others, because they know what it was like to go through depression and anxiety. But when you have a negative familial reaction, seeking your own self-care and compassion, I mean, that's re-traumatizing. So tell us about what you've discovered in terms of treating like generational trauma, because that's a fascinating topic. I mean, right, the charts that chart out how people's trauma tends to go through. I mean, you can say it's nature and nurture, because the nurture of it is learning the patterns that parents had.
100%. And actually, that's what I found very, very interesting, because a lot of the trauma that I had, or a lot of the depression that I had, I actually couldn't pinpoint it to one specific thing or specific incidences in my life. All I knew was that my parents had been through a lot of trauma. So that's where it all started, because they had a lot of these negative experiences, and they had like a lot of dysfunction in their family template. However, I didn't actually get to experience directly or firsthand a lot of the trauma that they did. But when I observed my behaviors and my dysfunctions, they were very much the same as my parents.
Wow.
So then I started to think, is there possibly a way that I could have inherited the same trauma that they did, even though I didn't go through the exact same experiences? And that's when I started looking into, is there a way that trauma is passed down through the genes, and not just through, reinforcements of actions and words? Like, is there a way that we can just pass trauma down through way of birth? And that's what I started to look into. And that is literally what took me into this journey and this path of talking about the inner feminine or the inner masculine, which to me embody the mother and the father wound. So I wanted to look at it as a continuation of the wounds we've taken on from our parents, but very separate in the sense that it now becomes your idea of your sense of self. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that absolutely does. Talk about the mother and father wound. That is a fascinating idea.
These are extremely, extremely prominent wounds. So basically, I look at the mother and the father relationship as the foundation that we will use to build our inner masculine and inner feminine self later on in life in our adult stages. So I'm just going to explain a little bit about what the inner masculine is. So I believe that every human, each and every person, has an inner masculine and an inner feminine.
Okay.
And if I try to explain the feminine, which I feel like we mostly take on from our mother, the feminine energy within us is like our desire to create, our desire for beautification, our desire to care and to be cared for, our ability to allow ourselves to care and to be cared for, our openness to intimacy, how well we handle intimacy with others, and especially in terms of love, when it comes to love and relationships. I think the feminine energy is what allows us to be open enough to experience healthy relationships, or if there is a blockage there, I feel like that will block our ability to open ourselves to love, emotions, and relationships. And the masculine energy now I see as the logical part of ourselves. So this is the part of ourselves that has to go out into the world and exist as like a functional human. This is the part of ourselves that has to have an individual identity.
Right.
You know, this is the part of ourselves that has to have order and organization, so that we know, you know, what we want out of life. We know what we don't want out of life. This is discipline. This is boundaries, you know.
Okay.
And it's also very much about our drive to achieve and our drive to do, and how well we're able to carry out the things that we are passionate about. And I believe that a lot of the root of dysfunctional trauma is from people having either their masculine or their feminine imbalance, or both parts of themselves imbalance.
Wow. Yeah, see, that dichotomy of order and creativity, or some people call it order and chaos, whatever. That's a very, right. It's a very primal dichotomy there. And it's so important for people to recognize that it's not a polarity. It doesn't have to be intention. It's the unification there.
100%. And the unification makes the whole. Okay.
Yes,
that makes the whole being, you know, that is when there is no longer a power struggle within self. You know, when you can bring both of these energies together and use them to create, literally, because that is what creation is about. You have the mother and the father, and you create the child. It's that third energy. So for me, the inner masculine and the inner feminine uniting, that third energy, that allows us access to be able to create or conjure or manifest anything we want, if those two parts of ourselves are in harmony and are in balance.
So I love, oh wow, Lordy, that's the English ambulance sound. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the English ambulance.
We don't have the same one in America. It's a different sound.
Really? I thought every like siren was the same siren.
It's not the no, it's different. Like, it's just it's different. Yeah. So I noticed something on your Twitter timeline that I wanted to talk about it really got me fired up in a great way. Yeah. So someone told you, I don't believe there's such a thing as a bad mother. And every mother does her best. That's really... Yes.
What do you think about that? Because it kind of caught me off guard, you know.
So to me, that betrays a rather significant ignorance about how bad some people can be.
Yes.
So my background is I work in mental health with trauma survivors, and I've heard stories of mothers who made choices that resulted in their children being neglected, abused, whatever. Mothers who chose, God forbid, sexually or physically abusive lovers, you know, and that was a child's stepfather, and that person kept abusing the child, and the mother denied it and mentally just blanked out and refused to admit that their child could be abused. I would call that a bad parent. There's so many different ways that parents can fail children, and so there's somewhat of a kind of an unwillingness to face the darkness by saying, la, 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 that there's every mother does the best she can. Well, a lot of us do. But let's just be honest. The first thing we have to do to heal any kind of cultural wounds and to get better as a society is to actually admit where there is wrong.
Truth is everything on this journey. That's why a lot of people don't make it. Literally.
Right. So I think people can be well-intentioned, but in grad school, and I know you probably learned this as well, there are those responses that separate therapists and therapeutic healers from kind of the lay person, like, you know, heaven need another angel, or it was for the best. Well, you can't say those kind of things. Like we can,
you really can't. It's really, really problematic.
No, you can't, because it's very reductionistic, and it's a way of shutting people down and saying, well, I don't want to hear about it, so here's your little positive statement.
100%. Literally, it just disregards any parental or specifically mother wounds or trauma completely, and it just sort of says, well, you know what, this doesn't exist. You weren't traumatized. Your mom did the best she could. I guess you're just ungrateful. In not so many words.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is in so many words, essentially. I mean, another thing is, I mean, you have some really good heat that you're bringing on the kind of quasi pseudo spiritual Twitter, right? Because this whole undercurrent of it's almost like mental health or spirit or any kind of organized religion, but on a more on a spiritual level, it's the same formula of do this and you'll feel better.
Yes.
No context needed. Just do a really quick thing, instead of like a Hail Mary, it's get the right kind of crystal or stone. It's just by a different
or just meditate twice a day, or just turn vegan already.
And it's not that easy sometimes. It's not that simple.
No, it's really, really not. Especially when we're talking about complex trauma. So if we think about trauma as something that takes years to be inbuilt and cemented in the individual, why on earth would this be something that could be deprogrammed in mere weeks or even months? Like, we have to understand, like, the same level of energy and dedication and commitment that it took to build this trauma is exactly the same, if not even more, that needs to be taken to unwind the trauma. There is no quick fix. And whilst some people would assume or categorize me as part of the spiritual community, what I try to be very conscious of doing is not being so detached from the human experience that I throw out these quick fixes. Like, it's almost like spirituality is now being marketed as the answer to everything. It's like, forget about religion, forget about traditional medicine, here's the answer, which it's never going to work, because it's literally replacing one like indoctrinative system with another. It's like, no, we're right, they're wrong.
Right.
Exactly what they started doing to us,
Yes. And it's kind of it's the worst parts of human nature, right? And so what we have to do is just be aware of it. Be mindful of the fact that we will latch on to stuff, right? And start to polarize and be open. Instead, you have to be open to new things. Always strive for that. An example of that is how you say, don't just look at red flags from others while dating. Oh,
exactly. Because we need to understand that, especially people who have suffered from mental illness and had mental health issues, they tend to have a lot of experience with people projecting upon them that they never actually realize that a lot of the times we internalize these dysfunctional behaviors and we start to project too.
Yes.
So it's very easy for us to develop this mode of understanding where it's the world against us, where it's everybody else who's the problem. Because once upon a time it was, in our childhood, it was the parents, imposing and projecting. It was the siblings, or it was the caregivers. So we developed this mentality like, I'm the wounded one, I'm the victim, but byproduct that makes me sanctimonious, because I'm not the narcissist. It's they who are the problem. I'm fine. And what that does is it gets us in a cycle of repeating the same patterns, the same mistakes, the same dysfunctions, because we never take the time to say, okay, maybe I'm the problem. And it's so difficult to do, because when you've been abused for so long, your worst fear is that you are the problem.
Absolutely. Yes. And so we have to just change the language of it's not I'm the problem. It's I may have some problematic behaviors.
Yes. I believe everything is a co-creation.
Yes.
So as much as another person might be doing something, you have to respond to this in a certain way to be a part of it. It's a co-creation, so it's like, okay, as much as what do they do, what am I doing?
Yes. Yeah, that gets lost. There's a lot of quick soundbite sort of tweets, posts on Facebook, whatever, that talks about what to look for in somebody else. And it's always us doing the screening from the outside, seeing what's coming in. Sometimes we have to recognize what we're putting out. Again,
100%.
It's sometimes that's not a popular message. And so if it's not, then people learn, unless they're very therapeutic and they actually care about this stuff, they'll learn, okay, I'm not going to talk about that. Oh, that brought up a lot of hate. What do you mean?
And I get attacked very often, as you could imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, everyone can use with some accountability and even if that's being accountable, to having good boundaries and not sitting on it until you explode, right? To have them on a mental basis. There's usually something we can do to recognize our own behaviors, because we're 100%. The ones. Yes. So you hear the concept trauma bond, and you which we'll get to the friendship thing too, but people can be
Yes.
bonded to abusers through
Yes.
traumatic events and start to replicate that. And they look for, just like we talk about abusive step parents, but
Yes.
like the example earlier, they can find partners who they're trying to unconsciously win that approval from an abusive father
Yes.
or whatever.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
recognize it's not you're a bad person for doing that. It's look at what
No
was
way.
on you. Unfortunately, we have responsibility, whether or not we did it, to heal ourselves of whatever was done. It sucks.
Exactly.
But finding a good therapist, or healer helps us recognize, it sucks. I'm responsible for myself because I didn't choose trauma, and I now have to choose to heal. But that's like the first step. Is to recognize that only you can heal yourself.
Exactly. And it's about empowerment. But I feel like a lot of people mistake empowerment and accountability with blame. They're like, well, why should I? Why should I have to do all of this? I didn't ask to be traumatized. But it's all about getting your power back. Because what abuse and trauma does is it takes your power away from you. So then you're dependent on somebody else to do your healing work for you, or somebody else to make sure that everything's okay. And it's like, no, you take your power back and say, I'm the one who's going to heal these patterns. I'm the one who has control of myself, because we can never control what anybody else does.
Right.
And that is the lesson that recurring traumatic relationships will teach us, if anything.
Absolutely. And it goes down to the therapeutic ethic of autonomy and teaching clients. And so like trying to do as much as we can to prepare them to terminate, not keeping them dependent, because then that just substitutes a former dictator character in their life with us.
Yes,
that doesn't.
Exactly. And I love the fact that you mentioned that, because I find what a lot of traumatized individuals do is they substitute one codependent relationship with another.
Absolutely.
So it becomes a constant cycle. It's like, okay, I broke up with this abusive person. Well, now I'm going to get back in contact with this friend from 3 years ago who used to control me as well. She's going to give me some good advice about this. She's going to know what to say. She's going to know how to fix my life for me.
Absolutely. Well, and people, it's okay to admit that freedom and empowerment can be scary. Again, people have to admit it.
Terrifying.
Yes. Sometimes we learn that it's scary to make decisions, and that it's easier if someone else tells us to do it. That way, if something goes wrong, we don't feel.
Exactly.
It's all about this pathological idea that mistakes are somehow shameful, and that you have to.
And damning. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like a lot of traumatized individuals are so terrified of making a mistake or doing something the wrong way.
Right.
And I think it comes from having parents or having, a background where you were taught that a lot of the things that you did was wrong. It comes from gaslighting,
It does.
Your perception is wrong. Your reality is wrong. You don't know how to live. You don't know how to function. So then you go out into the world and you start looking, unconsciously seeking these controlling and authoritative figures, because you're like, they have it all figured out. They will know how to run my life. They will know how to make sure that I don't make mistakes.
Yes. Yeah. And so one of the big causes of narcissism from a psychoanalytic perspective is a parent that projected all of their hopes and dreams onto the child, and the child learns that they're infallible, right? So mistakes become shameful. You can't allow yourself to see them. It becomes a huge blind spot. So I think we have a lot of fragile narcissistic individuals who
we do.
And that can masquerade as depression too, by the way, it's very, because there's a real depressive affect and emotional response when we fail. And so if someone doesn't respond well to stuff that would usually help with depression, there's usually an indication that there's maybe some personality stuff. And parents now don't know what direction to go when raising their kids, right? They don't know how much praise and participation trophy to give and how much accountability. That's a bad word. So there's just this cultural regression of accountability being a bad thing and crushing the spirit, when actually it's very helpful to recognize you're not perfect, and that's okay, because
100%. And that's where I feel like the inner masculine or the father comes in. It's that discipline, because I tend to notice a lot in parents and households that were led predominantly by the mother, like single mother households. The type of narcissist that they can produce tends to be a little bit different, because there isn't that structure there. There isn't that discipline.
Sure.
And there isn't that reinforcement of, like, you have to be held accountable. If you do something and it's wrong, there needs to be some kind of redemption. I find that when there's too much feminine energy, or when the mother is too lenient or too pandering to the child's needs, and too pandering to, the child being this, snowflake, or this precious
Right.
thing that can never, ever make a mistake, it creates a child who thinks they can do anything they want. There is no accountability. There is nobody to answer to. It's just sort of anything goes.
Yes. Wow. That is a great insight. Now, and I just want to riff on this for a minute. Tell us what kind of narcissism comes from the home where there's too much masculine or not enough feminine. If you have focused on that before.
Yeah. So that tends to create, in my opinion, a very traditional narcissist.
Yes.
So the type of narcissist who they're completely closed off and cold to emotions. They're very, very logical, to the point where everything is about thought. Everything is about what they think. Everything is logical. Feelings and emotions, they're basically disregarded. This is the traditional narcissist who we see attracted to quote unquote empaths, or highly sensitive individuals. So what they do with it is they mirror this wound that the empath has of not being seen or not being heard. The traditional empath, the traditional narcissist, they don't really care about seeing or validating you. Like, everything is to do with self-validation, because if the father was very, very harsh, and the father didn't allow room for emotional acknowledgement, these people internalize that, and to protect themselves, they almost convince themselves that emotional regulation or empathy is unneeded. It's unnecessary. It's,
right.
Well, my father, or my caregiver didn't waste time with these things because they don't matter. And if you think they do, well, it's because you're weak.
Bingo.
Because
right.
You just don't understand how life works.
Right. And I think that's absolutely crucial for people to recognize, is there's more than one way to be narcissistic, and just meaning self-focused in a way.
Yes. I feel like it's very important for us to recognize that there are different types of narcissists.
Yes.
So the first type that I was discussing, I would probably categorize them as a covert narcissist. And I feel like this type is a little bit more insidious, because they can easily mirror somebody who is highly sensitive, or somebody who's an introvert.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is such a great point. And you see, this is what's damaging about that. You see these Facebook posts, and you see all these things written by people with that kind of personality disorder about, well, whenever anyone asks accountability, whenever someone makes you feel this way, you need to write them off. And it's not from a perspective of saying don't tolerate abuse. It's like that Marilyn Monroe quote that people say, which I don't even know if you can attribute that to her. It's like, if you don't accept me at my worst, you don't deserve my best. Actually, if we reinforce negative behavior, there won't really be a best left.
There will never be a best.
And I think that's kind of the covert narcissist. I've been hurt, and that excuses everything I do forever.
Exactly. And I'm the victim. And if you try to hold me accountable, you're doing everything every abuser in my life ever did to me. You're abandoning me just like the rest.
Right. Exactly. Well, and then that gets into borderline personality disorder, doesn't it?
Yes.
I think that there's an epidemic of that because of the almost.
There really is.
I think
I feel like it probably manifests a little bit differently in men than women, because I don't understand why women are so much more easily diagnosed. I don't think it's a gender thing. I think it's about how differently it manifests.
Yes. Yes. Well, you're absolutely right about that. I think it's overdiagnosed in women, just like we have ADHD being overdiagnosed in men, and women having the inattentive type, and then they go underdiagnosed. I've had many clients like that who are women who had to get into their adulthood before anyone ever acknowledged that they were having attention issues. So, no, there's like pet diagnoses that get favored for one gender.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably borderline personality disorder in men is misdiagnosed often as either just pure narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial, which is what people would in the old days was called psychopathy or sociopathy. It's now kind of like antisocial. So in men, it looks like a lot more of the sort of threatening stance of, well, if you're going to abandon me, I'm going to be abusive, right? You can think about it in terms of like that cycle of abuse of the honeymoon phase, like idealizing the woman and then thinking she's cheating and then abusing and hating her and then et cetera. And it repeats.
Yeah.
So you're right. It isn't seen for that as much in men because the fear of abandonment turns into a rage that's fueled by fear.
And I also believe that in men with this illness, they're very good at finding a woman or a partner who's going to absorb all of their unhealed trauma. So they never feel like they need to seek help or go to a therapist because their partner tends to assume this role of the mother, the therapist, the father, the brother, the friend they never had, the everything.
Yes.
So if you see their partner as like a hub of just absorbing all of the pain and enabling and never drawing boundaries, they don't need, well, of course everybody needs, but they don't need to go and get the treatment because they have somebody to pour all of their wounds into.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that you hit on something. A lot of people will find a sort of pathological vessel relationship with someone rather than doing the self-work. And that, to circle back around, is why you can't rely on someone else for your healing and why accountability and empowerment matter, right?
Yes.
Because if we're using someone else for it and anything were to happen to them or they were to respond incorrectly, well, then our idealism for that person is broken and it's just a poor interpersonal.
And then we find ourselves spiraling out of control and all of a sudden our only foundation is shaken again and then we're back to reliving the trauma.
Absolutely. Yeah. Re-traumatization.
Should we talk about trauma bonding? Because
yes.
we're kind of on a
please go for that. I want to hear more about that from you.
So in terms of friendship, so if we look at a traumatized child or a traumatized individual as somebody who now has to go out and function in the world with the skills and the belief systems that they've learned, the traumatized child now goes out into the world with the same codependent beliefs or formulas that they learned from the home. And what tends to happen is because they unconsciously seek a very specific type of individual who mirrors their familial wounds, is they attract somebody else who's also been through very similar kind of wounds. And what this tends to mean is instead of developing a healthy, functional, or quote unquote normal friendship that securely attached individuals will, they just recreate these dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional friendships. And then the basis or the foundation of the friendship very early on, because if you think of these people as lacking boundaries or having boundary issues, like securely attached individuals, if you newly meet somebody, it's gonna follow process before you get to a place where you start to open up and divulge information. Trauma individuals, they don't work that way. So it's no boundaries. It's we meet straight away. It's 100 miles per hour. The first hour of us meeting, I'm telling you about everything that ever happened to me in my childhood, how my mother abused me, and you are telling me everything that happened to you. And for the first time, I feel so seen and so understood not because you know who I am, not because you understand my temperaments, but just because we've both been through painful experiences. And that's what we bond over. And that's the foundation that we build upon trauma.
Right. And I loved the series of tweets about that. If the brain works in terms of presence, in terms of what's there. So when you tell someone not to think about something, they're going to immediately think about it, and the not doesn't factor into it. So when you discuss trauma and negativity, there is a healing component to validation. I definitely believe that. However, validation is the first step toward transformation, toward actually changing. And if we're hung in discussing the commonalities of trauma that befell us, we're not discussing the solution in the healing.
Exactly. And we're remaining stuck in the trauma.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, it takes an absolute huge awareness of our own ego, our own processes. And I mean ego in the Freudian sense of just our reality testing component. It takes a huge mastery of that to recognize, hey, I'm focusing on the negative and I'm just bitching. I mean, that's huge that you recognized that, Cindy.
And that's the thing. Like, if you have a trauma bond, and with me in the past, it's only now that I'm starting to have functional friendships. Everybody around me was a trauma bond, basically. And if you don't have anybody who's healthy enough to hold you accountable, you're just going to build and manifest and create and stew in this huge pool of negativity when all you do is talk about everything that's ever gone wrong in your life. There's no one to stand up and say, okay, maybe we should talk about how we can get help for this. Or maybe instead of going through these patterns over and over again, we can talk about how we can break free from this. There is nobody to sort of put a stop to this, because both individuals are relishing in finally having somewhere where they can just spew all of their negativity, all of their resentment, basically.
Yes, absolutely. That's pretty awesome. What do you think about the failings of the mental health system? What do you see as the biggest thing that is not making therapy relevant to people who should really go?
Well, from what I've heard from a lot of clients that I've spoken to who came to me looking for something a little bit different, is that in traditional therapy, there's a lot of talking. So they get to talk a lot at the therapist, and they get to they get to say everything that's happened, everything that's wrong, everything that's on their mind. And a lot of them feel like, okay, what now? There's not a lot of substantial feedback given. There's not a lot of step-by-step help. And a lot of people just feel like they're prescribed a pill very quickly. It's like, okay, here, have this, plaster. We're not going to treat the wound, but we're just going to silence it with this. And a lot of people also find it quite impersonal. So you are opening up about deeply traumatic things, and you might have somebody facing you who's like, okay, we're on the clock. They keep checking their time, or they're treating you just like a case study.
A number.
It's like, you're just another number. But it's such a big moment. A lot of the times you're opening up about dark things that you've never told anyone. You can't feel like you're being dehumanized or you're being treated like just another. There needs to be a greater sense of personability and intimacy and recognition. That's where I feel like the wounded archetype is very important, because it's like, if I could look at you as a mirror of where I used to be or where I have been, I can not only validate your experiences, but I can also help you given tried and tested proven methods. It's like, I've done this, so can you. It's not, I've read a book about what you can do, and I'm just going to reiterate that to you.
Right. It's a dynamic empathy and compassion that comes out of that. Absolutely.
Yeah. And once again, I'm going to go back to talking about the inner masculine, the inner feminine, because it's a version of therapy that incorporates both. So you have the feminine, which is a therapist who genuinely cares, who's genuinely giving you some maternal affirmation and validation that you need. But then you have the masculine validation, which is like, okay, after this, we're going to do this. Okay, here's how you can help yourself. Or here's the tried and tested scientific diagnosis or methods. However, the inner feminine is there. Like, I'm listening, I hear you, I understand. And I genuinely care. I'm not just waiting for you to get out of here so I can have, my tea break.
Yes. Oh, that's such a relevant observation about the different therapeutic errors going one way or the other, because I've heard stories from clients who've seen therapists before that one of them was too gruff and would only ask like yes or no questions and was very regimented. And so that's kind of a masculine error, we would say. And then you look at just the pure cognitive behavior therapy of, well, just think differently. It gets very masculine in terms of right or wrong. And then I've heard about clients who saw therapists who had extreme empathy, where the therapist was crying and emoting and very upset by the client telling her a story. Yeah, but think about and the client felt like she was hurting the therapist, and so shut down. It's like her extreme
hyperfemininity.
Right. So you get, and there's nothing wrong with masculinity or femininity. In fact, we need both, but it's that fusion of empathy first, then solutions, because clients will feel that clients got to feel like their story before you make suggestions on how to alter it.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important, I think, for the kind of work that I do, to provide a platform where people can have both. Like, my clients who speak to me or who see me, they get a genuine sense that they are speaking with somebody who actually cares about the issues that they're going through. And it's not just another number, it's not another person on my list that I need to get through. I see this as a very systematic issue that exists in our world that we need to deal with on a grand scale. It's not just about these clients or individuals. Like, it's becoming an epidemic that we seriously need to deal with.
Yes. Well, how much do you think online culture and the massive amounts of other opinions and judgment that people face factors into cultural decline?
It's a huge, huge factor. It might sound a bit hypocritical because social media helped me to develop the platform I have.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's such a double-edged sword. It's the extreme helpfulness of connecting with people when it's like conversations multiply, right? It's just the ability to heal amplified and the ability to harm, and the harmful element is just louder. And
And I feel like social media is helping us to become a little more narcissistic, because it's all about me. Look at me, look at everything I'm doing with my life. And it's a disregard for how anybody else feels. Like, people will come online and shame other people just for the purposes of shining themselves in a different light. It's a very narcissistic environment where it's like, it's all about self. We mock people, we take pictures of strangers, put it online, and everybody retweets. It's a very mob mentality also online. So I definitely think that as we grow with our social media presence as a society, it is going to bring about quite a few more issues with MPD.
Yes. And the problem, one of the big problems is when we're interacting with people online that we primarily only know online, they're just a picture and words at most. And so the individuation and this almost psychopathy that's very contextual of, this isn't really a person. It's difficult for our brains to recognize that as a person when it really is just a few words. Did you hear about that case? And there's an HBO documentary called I Love You Now Die that I was just watching that's kind of got me primed to think about this. But did you hear about the American teen who talked her boyfriend into suicide even when he got out of the car, even when he got out of the truck and was choking on carbon monoxide?
Yeah, I do. Vaguely, I remember that story.
Well, and it just sounds like such a case of human beings as entertainment, of her like gamifying like this, turning into a mission, coaching someone to commit suicide. And it just, you have to wonder, you have to wonder if this would happen. I'm not blaming technology only in taking the human component out, not at all, but I think technology can amplify human human.
100%.
Right.
100%, you know, we're moving towards a very mechanical society, and it is quite scary.
Yes. Yeah. And again, do you like Black Mirror, by the way?
I am obsessed.
What did you want to?
Absolutely.
Oh, this is great. Tell us some of like your favorite episodes, or one that really stands out, and why. This is going to be good.
Which one really stands out and why? I remember there was this one with the woman who she lost her. I can't remember if it was her husband or her partner.
Yes.
And then she got to create this like weird replica kind of from all his past voice messages, or the kind of things he would say. Yeah, I would say that was definitely an episode that stuck out to me, and that would definitely be amongst my favorite. And the reason why is because it sort of challenges why we love people, because it's like, okay, you can have him back. Like, she got to have a version of him back. And it's like, this is basically like a model of him. You know, everything is practically the same. It looks just like him. It talks just like him. And it's like, is this enough? You know, do you love the outer shell of the person, the characteristics of the person? Do you just love the makeup of the person, how you perceive them to be? Or do we love a person because it's an actual person? Because I remember after a while, she wasn't satisfied anymore with this replica, because it's like, it's just not him. You know, it looks just like him, it talks like him, it functions like him, but there's something still quite empty about it. So I think it sort of made me think about how we love people and why we love people, and our openness to let people go and not just have them around serving us for selfish purposes. I think it made me think about that a lot in my mind, and how I would handle that. You know, if I lost somebody, would I be able to let them go? Or, you know, would I be a bit selfish and be like, no, you know, I want to have like a fake model or copy of this person just to appease myself, just to avoid my mourning process, which we do that all the time, you know, go through all these ways to avoid mourning.
Oh,
so,
my God. Yeah. Oh, so that episode, I looked it up. It's it's Be Right Back is what it's called. And it's really, it's great because it shows, I mean, you can get very dark with this and think about how in real life, when there's someone who has a terminal illness or is ill, and the family, of course, out of love, wants that person to stay alive, right? Even that person has made peace with passing due to pain and just the quality of life issue. So it's like taking that concept and then amplifying it to, okay, the person's gone. What if you could have an ideal model to your own unidirectional attachment?
Exactly. And it's like, would you want that? Would that be sufficient? Or is it specifically about the person, like the soul essence or something in them that just makes them them, you know?
Yes. Yeah, that's missing. Yeah, I like the one about the credits episode, because it shows that everything can turn into a commodity.
Yeah. Just about anything, literally.
Even rebellion 15 million merits. That's what it is. Anything can be turned into a sort of sanctioned form of self-expression that's on a minor level, right? So you can placate people by giving them just enough freedom and kind of the ability to dream a little bit, just not rebel.
Yeah.
And in ways, that's what social media does with negative emotions, right? Is people can go and vent and get a little micro fix and then not fix the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I literally feel like social media exacerbates mental illness, because people can come on there and have, you know, the satisfaction of attacking a stranger or, you know, literally becoming triggered by something and then, you know, hurling abuse at that person. And it gives them sort of feeling of release at the time. But then later, when they switch off and they're back in the real world and they're back in reality, they have to deal with whatever wounds and triggers that they can't pass off onto somebody else.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. And it's it's extremely problematic how people vague book and they will be like, I am so upset, I don't even want to talk. Well, if you didn't want to talk, you would post that probably. It's really
exactly.
It's a regress form of needing nurturing and comfort and not knowing how to get that. And so kind of having that omniscient, like almost schizophrenically omniscient idea that if you just complain, people will be able to read your mind and understand.
Exactly. Or that this person, however they, triggered you, they will somehow retreat or give you an apology or, give you some sort of like power over them. Like, oh, I'm so... They literally try and beat you into submission now. And I think a lot of this cancel culture is also following that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like to ask people on the show, and kind of switching gears, what 3 people would you meet, alive or dead, if you can meet anybody? The only thing is they have to have actually been real.
Oh, that is a good one. What 3 people I would meet? One of the people I would definitely have liked to meet, this is going to be a little bit controversial, but I would say Hitler. Just because I would love to interview him and just get into his head and just understand what his pathology was,
Sure.
Because I definitely think that's quite a complex individual in the sense that there's so many different portrayals of him. You have him portrayed naturally as a crazy mass murderer, dictator, and then you have people who say he was, he loved kids and he was very creative and he was very intelligent. And I believe in the complexity of humans. So I think you would be a great mind to pick for complexity. Number 2, I would choose Prince. I would literally choose Prince just because I feel like he's just a ball of light and sparkle and charisma and charm and energy. And I just love to be around that, I love to be caught in the sphere of electricity that I think he just naturally gives off.
Nice.
The 3rd person, I would have loved to meet, let me see. I'd say Michael Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Of course. No,
Definitely
I think a lot of people would want to talk to him, even in spite of the controversy.
Yes. Naturally, you would want to see what somebody who's so talented is like up close,
So going back to your first pick there, I think listeners would probably know that you're purely wanting to talk to Hitler out of a curiosity there, because a lot of your posts have to do with kind of anti-white nationalism. So and it gets into when African English, I get what is the proper term for in Britain? Is it African English?
We call us Black Brits. So Black
Ooh, Brits. That's catchy. Okay.
It is quite snappy, isn't it?
We don't have that in America. Yeah. So when you talk about that, when people unite, when Black Brits unite, it's dangerous to oppressive systems, right?
Very, yes, very. And I have a lot of people actually who don't really understand me online, because let's just use, for example, how I'd love to interview Hitler. I am not all about, obviously. I'm very much about the information and the truth and the knowledge and the research. That's my main goal. So at times I may come across a bit unconventional, because I feel like sometimes you have to take the emotion temporarily out of something in order to be able to see the truth. Yes.
I understand that. Sometimes you have to have a cognitive understanding of things before you get emotional. All right.
You do.
I think there's a lot to that. I think that's what makes you a good healer and listener, because again, empathy, validation is great, but it definitely has to be something that's followed with understanding on a mental level, or there isn't going to really be kind of growth.
100%. The last thing I want to do is sell people more fallacies and illusions, especially when this is all they've ever had.
Yes. Yeah. Say more about your views on cyclical learning and being taught the same lesson by the universe if people don't learn the first. You post a lot about that, which I think is helpful. You're very open about it. You don't talk about mistakes as a negative or learning experiences as a negative.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I believe that, just as every year we experience the same days, we experience moon cycles, we experience seasons. I believe life, the universe, the world is cyclical.
Okay.
And I feel like a lot of the thing that gets people caught up and trapped up in their trauma is feeling stuck, is feeling like, this is always going to happen to me. I keep making the same mistake. Why am I so stupid? Or why can't I just change?
Right.
Because I feel like if you can approach it in a different way, like, okay, I'm back at this lesson again. Last year I had this lesson, or 2 years ago I had this lesson. And I learned it. I learned it through pain, but now I find myself here again. So it's like, okay, maybe I'm supposed to learn it in a different way. Maybe there was something that I missed the last time. I don't believe that this is necessarily a mistake. I believe that we should be very conscious about the way that we perceive things. I believe that it's an opportunity. It's a cycle that came round again for a reason. So I feel like people need to be very conscious and very aware of things that they find to be like patterns that they fall into. Because I think that's the reason. There's a message in the pattern and there's a lesson in the pattern. And if you remove the guilt and you remove the shame, you're far more likely to be able to deal with it head on and not keep falling into it.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think it's important to confront the lessons and pay attention. What happens is if people deny or ignore what's happening, what they're learning, then they don't integrate that lesson because their memory isn't active. And that's what happens with re-traumatizing. People are experiencing it only on a somatic, experiential, physical level, and not brain isn't learning, okay, this happened, here's how to avoid it.
Exactly. It's just like monkey see, monkey do. Like they're just falling into a pattern over and over again. And I think another way that traumatized individuals could empower themselves is if they can see these experiences as a lesson, and obviously that's so hard to do when you're going through the emotion and you're involved in the emotion at the time.
Absolutely.
However, it's another reason why we need to learn how to balance our inner masculine. Be like, okay, this really, really hurts, but what is it trying to tell me? I know it hurts. I know it does, but that's not all it does,
Yes. So, and I want to hit on something you talked about earlier. You talked about how there was a shame component to being in grad school, learning methodologies for healing depression, but not implementing your idea of people ask you if you still make mistakes with all the knowledge you have. Part of that issue is people conceptualizing cognitive, like semantic knowledge with implicit, right? So if our implicit patterns are usually what are activated by interpersonal stimuli. So other people, right? So we can know on a cortical prefrontal cortex level how we would want to behave rationally, but our limbic system, if it's triggered and we don't improve, if we don't increase the threshold of that before we get activated a bit to regress, then it doesn't matter how much knowledge we have because it's a state-dependent thing. Where when we're activated into trauma, we're anxious, that's how we're going to respond.
Exactly.
It's not
literally, it's like a call and response.
Right. It's like you read a book, you learn about the best way to respond to things. If we don't internalize that, then it doesn't really go anywhere. And that's why I love EMDR.
Exactly.
I love active therapies that help people to reorient their brain away from trauma on a holistic level versus just learning what you should do, because that doesn't penetrate that deep.
Exactly. And the danger is what it can do sometimes is to create the illusion that you're healed, or create the illusion that you don't need to seek further treatment, because you're like, well, I've learned all this. I know all this. So, I don't need to go to that extra therapy class. I don't need to take extra time to heal.
Right.
I read the book. I took the class. You know?
Right. It's all about where is the application? How
100%.
applied is this now? How integrated into ourself versus just in our brain as a little flashcard?
Yeah,
Oh,
100%.
that is awesome. That is great. Anything you want to add? I want to really hit anything you want to talk about clinically. Anything you want to add, even about metaphysical stuff that you think is helpful for people to know, that goes beyond, like the spiritual stuff that you think is most helpful for people outside psychology and psychotherapy, what you've discovered.
Mm-hmm. I would say that for me personally, one of the most helpful things metaphysically was me coming to understand my path and my purpose here. I feel like every individual has a path and a purpose, whether they believe in a higher power or higher entity. I believe that everybody should try to find out why they're here, you know, what course the trajectory of their life is following. And
Right.
I feel that going back to the beginning helps you understand this. So going back to your childhood, going back to the earliest experiences that you learned, the earliest belief systems that were built in, can help you and teach you about where you're supposed to go, and also about why you keep experiencing certain lessons. I don't believe in coincidence at all. And I think that one of the things that modern Western society is missing, that was very big, you know, in Africa and where I'm from, is paying attention to signs and symbols, not taking things as coincidence, but understand that the universe is always, always speaking to us, and we are always guided, and we're always provided with information that can help us to make different decisions. We just have to be attentive. And a life of consciousness, it doesn't even have to be over spiritualized. You know, awareness is a very basic thing. And awareness can come in the form of journaling your experiences. And I'm also a big advocate of dreams and dream symbolism. I believe that's where like over 50% of our messages and signs and symbols come from. And I believe that an individual can, you know, kickstart their healing journey just from being conscious about their dreams, the images that are projected to them, and why.
Dream work is so fascinating because there are just a plethora of different schools of thought on that. So in basically analytic school, it's more like a one-to-one interpretation, because Freud was very masculine minded and very much what I say goes. And then you get into like the Jungian archetypal analyses that is
my favorite.
more open. And then you get Gestalt therapy, had a whole way of looking at dreams where you act out the parts of the dream, the elements of it, to kind of get an idea of what you make of them from an embodied perspective. No matter how much people want to stay clinical in terms of observable, measurable stuff, we have to admit that dreams are relevant. Now the idea, science tells us, is that dreams are where we consolidate memories and pare away unnecessary stuff. And we usually remember more emotionally laden content. And so dreams are kind of like a paring away. There's something to it no matter what, right? It's just
no matter what angle you look at it at, it's definitely a phenomenon we need to look into, and we should look into it.
Yeah. What's fascinating is there's so little training in graduate programs now for dream analysis, and clients are so interested in it.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So and so a lot of post-grad work's necessary. I think for any therapist out there who wants to go that route, like I have with getting a license and all that stuff, you know, collecting insurance, billing, you really need to go beyond just the 2-year education you get.
You really do.
Yeah, because you're just getting a buffet, a little helping, a little microscopic assembly of each main theory, and then afterward you're supposed to go out and explore it on your own and then specialize.
It's definitely being given a formula of other people's theories. That's essentially what psychology is about, like theories of other people collected together and sort of reiterated back to you. And I always feel like the individual journey is very important, especially for the therapist. So harmonizing different modes of thought, you know, different elements of research, which I think Jung did very, very well. He
Yes.
was not scared at all, to go outside of the box and add a little bit of his own perception into it, which is a gift, because I feel like every great healer or every great person who comes and is supposed to deliver a new way of understanding, the only way that they can do this is if they challenge and go against the traditional models.
Yes.
That's the way that we can, expand healing and expand what it means to be healed, and our perceptions of trauma and what trauma is. I feel like it's a field that constantly and consistently needs to grow. And it shouldn't end with these popular psychologists that we know. We shouldn't keep repackaging their theories. We should definitely search for more.
Yes, I agree. Oh my gosh, beautiful. Okay, on that note, let's draw to a close. Tell our listeners where they can find you on Twitter. And I'll add it, of course.
Yes. So my followers or anybody who's interested in finding out more about me or more information about what I do, you can find me on Twitter at Seek Cindy. You can find me on Instagram at Seek Cindy Official. You can email me, cindyanna-boo@hotmail.co.uk. You can find my WordPress, cindyanna-boo.wordpress.com. From there you should be able to find everything else that is me related.
Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you for being on, Cindy.
Thank you.